My name is Alexander Schmitz. I'm a partner at Endeavour Vision, an investment firm headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, and we are delighted to be a part of the MedTech Strategist virtual conference this year. Today, I'm speaking with Bob Paulson, CEO of VentureMed, a Minneapolis-based device company that's developed a novel peripheral vascular catheter, the Flex Vessel Prep System, to treat blockages in the arteries of the legs. The technology creates precise micro-incisions in the lesions obstructing these arteries to minimize the risk of dissection and to improve the diffusion of drugs delivered by drug-coated balloons and stents to treat the underlying peripheral artery disease. Bob joined VentureMed as CEO in 2019 after a long and distinguished career that has taken him from the vice president and general manager of Medtronic's surgical navigation business through to lead a number of medical device startups to successful exits. I'm delighted to be here with Bob today. And Bob, before we chat about VentureMed, perhaps you could just share with us a little bit of your own personal background and the path that led you to take on this new challenge.
Thanks, Alex. As I think about joining VentureMed after nearly 25 years in the medical device business and 15 years in doing several other things before that, I'll start with what attracted me to VentureMed. I had three key criteria. First, I wanted an early commercial stage medical device company that really had a unique and compelling value proposition in large global markets with big unmet clinical needs. Secondly, and very importantly, I wanted an experienced and a cohesive investor group who were aligned on their investment thesis in the company to ensure that we were going to have the funding to do the things that we need to do. And third, really the opportunity to build and recruit a leadership team that had the background, skills, and experiences to drive commercial adoption, develop and commercialize new indications, and really generate clinical data that would support our US and global commercial adoption and reimbursement strategies. You know, my love and passion for medical device really began at Medtronic when I first experienced the personal satisfaction of knowing you can be part of a company that builds a product that helps physicians to change the course of patients' lives. I joined Medtronic during Bill George's tenure as CEO. The company was accelerating its growth into new markets beyond its traditional cardiac rhythm management business, had done a series of strategic acquisitions. And I had the opportunity to work on the acquisition of Software Danik, which at that time was a global leader in the spinal and cranial business, and then lead the integration team. I learned that I really love building teams and running businesses, and it fueled my desire to leave the large corporate side and leverage what I had learned and my previous experience doing equity investments, doing mergers and acquisitions, integrations, and join the medical startup world. So I did a series of companies, Advanced Bionics, which had cochlear implants, Endocardial Solutions, which was intercardiac mapping and navigation. And we built teams that developed and commercialized really complex software-based systems that included capital equipment, single-use devices, and addressed challenging and unmet needs in large markets. And I joined NextEra in 2008, where we were developing a vapor-based thermal energy system to treat benign prostatic hyperplasia in an office procedure. Again, combination of software, capital equipment, and a single-use device, which over 10 years took us through the development, multiple clinical trials, FDA clearance, and commercialization up to the time when Boston acquired the company in 2008. So back to your question, why VentureMed? The opportunity to make a difference in the lives of physicians and patients with a simple, safe, and effective device that has a distinctive value proposition, reduces procedure times, complications, and procedure costs, large growing global market, and investors who are aligned.
Well, that's fantastic. Thanks, Bob, for sharing a little bit of your background. And obviously, we got to know each other through the NextEra experience, and that was indeed a very successful exit back in 2018. Can you tell us a little bit about peripheral artery disease and how the disease impacts patients?
Yeah, so peripheral artery disease affects more than 20 million people in the US and 200 million people globally. It's a $3 billion global market. It's basically arteriosclerotic disease in the peripheral vasculature, which is below the waist. It's very similar to coronary disease. However, the anatomy and the biology of the peripheral arterial vessels are very different from the coronaries, which require different device approaches to address. So that those fatty deposits and calcium that builds up in the walls of arteries the types of devices that work very effectively in the coronaries have demonstrated challenges in below the waist when you're treating peripheral arterial disease.
And how do physicians typically try to treat PAD? What are the current therapies available, and what are some of the challenges and or limitations of existing technologies?
Yeah, so historically, again, the first approach was to use percutaneous transluminal angioplasty, or PTA, in the peripheral arterioles, like had been used in the coronaries. And what was found is there was a very high rate of vessel dissections or tearing, which then required stents to be able to address. But stents perform very different in the peripherals than they do in the coronaries, because in the peripheral arterial vessels, you're surrounded by muscle and bone, and you twist and you turn. And so those stents undergo significant stress. They fracture, they collapse, and they can cause restenosis. About 15 years ago, atherectomy devices that debulk or remove calcified plaque began to be utilized in the peripherals. And again, you have tortuous anatomy, you have devices that are straight and linear, and you have high rates of dissection. So those standard approaches that work in the coronaries have seen additional challenges in the peripherals.
So tell us a little bit about the Flex system. It was developed by vascular surgeons. Why is vessel prep important, and what does Flex offer with respect to the treatment of PAD and some of the challenges and limitations that you just referred to?
Yeah, so over the past 3 to 5 years, the data has become very compelling that the use of drug-coated therapies to treat peripheral artery disease, or drug-coated stents, scaffolds, have demonstrated significantly improved sustained outcomes. However, the data also demonstrates that if you don't prepare the vessel ahead of time, modify the plaque to create channels to allow the drug to diffuse to the vessel, then the outcomes are not as compelling. So those traditional approaches like balloon angioplasty and atherectomy, atherectomy works in highly calcified plaque, but in many cases, patients have long lesions of mixed morphology, and it's very difficult to go in with an atherectomy device and debulk without causing those dissections, then which require repair. So Dr. John Pigott, who is the founder of VentureMed, is a vascular surgeon. And as a very busy endovascular surgeon over the years, he had a lot of experience with PTA and atherectomy devices in treating his patients. And seeing these complications and thinking about what really was going to cause or improve the effectiveness of delivery of the drug-coated therapies, which will cause them to deliver Flex, which is really a very simple approach to create long linear microincisions in lesions of any length to improve vessel compliance, minimize vessel trauma, and really optimize the delivery of the drug-coated therapies.
And in terms of clinical data and outcomes to date, what have you seen with Flex, and what's been the kind of response and reaction from the clinical community with regard to vessel prep generally, and specifically with respect to Flex?
So the data, again, is the data's been published over the last 2 to 3 years, especially with 3 to 5 year data from the drug-coated balloons, have clearly demonstrated the need for vessel prep prior to the delivery of the drug-coated therapy. If you don't modify the plaque, you don't get an optimal outcome. With respect to Flex specifically, we have real-world clinical data on more than 500 patients where we have consistently demonstrated the ability to improve vessel compliance in either calcified or mixed plaque morphologies and lesions of any length. And that's really key. Long lesions are the bane of the physician's challenge, because how you consistently treat those long mixed morphology lesions is challenging. By improving that vessel compliance, it allows either the drug-coated balloon or a PTA balloon, if that's used, to be inflated at significantly lower pressures, which then reduces the number and the severity of dissections, no flow-limiting dissections, and really minimizes then the ability the need to use stents to repair those dissections.
2020 has been the year of COVID, and and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you to talk a little bit about how COVID has impacted VentureMed and the team, and kind of just what the company's response has been in this unprecedented period.
Yeah, so it's been a challenge on one hand, and there's been a silver lining or a blessing on the other hand. So we were in the midst of preparing to relaunch the second generation system when COVID shut down elective procedures across the US. But it also then gave us the opportunity to use the downtime to really complete a next round of updated validation testing and improvements to both the design and the manufacturing processes for the Flex system. We also used the time recognizing that or anticipating that access to cath labs was going to be inhibited post COVID. We used that time to build an online training and education program, both for the rehiring of the next generation sales organization, but also really to train staff and physicians, be able to do it remotely, to be able to do it with accessing. They have questions, they can access the answers with a handheld mobile device, their own handheld mobile device, just to access the program. So really trying to streamline that training education process. So those 6 months that we've been in this period of time, we've been able to accomplish some things that we were going to have to do in parallel otherwise.
No, thanks. And looking forward, can you just, in our remaining few minutes here together, can you share with us a little bit what the next couple of months and years for the company look like, what your vision for the future is, and what comes next for VentureMed?
Yeah, so what comes next is really launching that second generation system with an entirely new sales organization, but frankly, an entirely new organization. We relocated the company from Toledo to Minneapolis about 18 months ago, and have built a new team really across the business up here. So the initial 6 sales force individuals are now on board as we prepare to launch the system. We're also going to do a targeted launch in Germany in Q1 of next year. And it's really relaunching the first generation system, and then accelerating finalizing the development of a below the knee application, looking at other applications, including treating the iliacs and treating the venous, so really leveraging that Flex technology platform into new indications, which is development focused versus really research focused, and continuing to grow and the adoption of the system.
And you mentioned earlier that one of the things that attracted you was the sort of aligned investor syndicate. Can you speak to us just quickly in terms of the company's financing plans going forward?
Yeah, so we are actually just at the front end of raising a Series C round of capital. So as we look out for the next 2 to 3 years, it'll take just over $20 million in new capital to fund the Gen 2 commercialization efforts in the US and Germany. There's some prospective clinical data we want to generate to support both our commercial and incremental reimbursement strategies, and then optimize device performance and expand the product portfolio. So we're at the front end of starting that process right now, and frankly, looking for investors that share a vision that's consistent with our current investors to really commercialize and expand the adoption and utilization of this technology globally.
Well, this has been a really helpful discussion, Bob. I appreciate your time and sharing some of your perspectives and experience and the VentureMed story. So thank you, and best of luck.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.